Welcome back, subscribers, and welcome new viewers to my channel, The Creative Woman. And today I'm going to be reading from my Pluto book, and the author is Jeffrey Wolf Green. And this is about any of you who have natal Pluto in the 4th house or Cancer. But first, I would like to thank each and every one of you who have subscribed, who like and who share my videos, because that helps my whole channel to circulate to more and more individuals just like you who need this information. And I want to give another special thank you to all of you, tremendous supportive audience that I have. And I can't tell you how much that I am so very appreciative of all of your beautiful comments, your beautiful energy, and your encouragements also on my new book that I am hopefully going to be able to very soon publish and get out to all of you, because that is another detailed information that I'm not able to speak about. It would take too long on my videos. But I'm hoping to get that out very, very soon. Okay, and any of you who want to know any of the other services that I provide, you can look in the drop-down box below this video. All right, so viewers, let's get to this reading. And I want to give a special thanks out to Jacquie for enabling this video to be done. So thank you, Jacquie. Okay, and any of you who would like a written copy of this, just let me know. Send me an email, and then I will email one back to you. Okay, just look at my hair. There we go. Okay, so Pluto in the 4th house or Cancer. Oh, I don't know if I said this is going to be number 7 Pluto viewer request. Okay. Pluto in the 4th house or Cancer demonstrates that an evolutionary cycle is closing and that a new cycle is underway. Individuals with Pluto in the 4th house have been attempting and desiring to learn the evolutionary lesson of security rather than deriving emotional security from any external factor, such as parents, job, lover, etc. These individuals have been learning to create and supply their own emotional security from within themselves. That's a huge deal, huge deal. Because this evolutionary impulse is rather new, most individuals with a 4th house Pluto have not completely learned this lesson. Thus, most will choose to be born into family situations wherein one or both parents produce a variety of emotional shocks that force the individual back in upon him or herself. Commonly, one or both parents of these individuals do not recognize nor understand the inherent individuality of these people, and therefore their emotional needs often go unfulfilled by the family. In this way, these individuals are thrown back upon themselves to enforce the evolutionary lesson of internal security and the minimization of external dependencies. These lessons take place or manifest totally within the emotional structure of these individuals. The karmic and evolutionary lessons involve the nature and basis of emotions, moods, and feelings, and the causes and sources of a particular mood, feeling, or emotion. This kind of early environmental experience can be extremely difficult for a child. As children, we're very sensitive and vulnerable because our sense of individuality of who and what we are is minimally defined. Our self-image and therefore sense of individuality is impacted upon in a very large way by our parents and early environment. We tend to take in wholesale the messages from our cultural surroundings and from our parents. About 80%, about 80% of fourth house Pluto individuals have had a series of prior life experiences in which their emotional needs have not been successfully met by one or both of their parents. They will come into life with those unconscious memories, and in many cases will again be born into an environmental, parental situation in which their individuality and emotional needs are not recognized or met. It is not uncommon for these individuals to have a difficult karma or prior life association with one or both parents in this life. Unresolved karmic, oh my gosh, it's not comic at all. I don't know why that came out, karmic issues. But what I wanted to say is this is why I love astrology so very much, because there's no blame. So those of you can see that are listening right now, this is your, of course, this is what has happened to you. Absolutely, no doubt. 80% of you, very, very, in the past lives too, not just, this is not just your first time. So you can see that if you did, which some of you probably did, blame your parents or one of your parents, at least got angry or frustrated or something like that. I know I did, even though I don't have this specific placement. I have another type of issue for myself personally. You can now let that go, because this is what you were given at birth for a specific reason, and now you can take care of it properly. Wow. And many of you from a prior life as well. Okay. These prior life associations create memories that are held at an unconscious level. There you go. Unconscious, subconscious. And maybe it's connected to your, specifically for some of you, your nodes of the moon, which is definitely put into each and every one of our subconscious, so we don't know. Unconscious, subconscious, you don't know. Now you're becoming aware. You're bringing it into your conscious awareness. Okay. Okay. Thus, much of the interaction that can take place between child and parent is associated with compulsive emotional behavior patterns whose origins are rooted in or caused by difficult prior life associations. In cases of this kind, the specific nature of the prior life difficulty or karma must be determined by relating the individual's birth chart to the chart of one or both of your parents. In varying degrees of magnitude, these individuals will have emotional problems directly linked to a feeling of not being sufficiently nurtured, appreciated, or understood for who they are as individuals. And any of you, I'm being called to say, let you know that any of you who feel the call to do this, to get your parents' information, or maybe you already have your parents' information, and to have it compared with your birth chart, and you'd like me to do that, I'd love to do that. But you don't have to get me. You can have any astrologer would be happy to do that. But those of you who choose to use me, that's great. Send me an email and I would be happy to do so. Okay. Coming into this life, the memory associations from the past are ignited once again as they experience the same kinds of environmental and parental situations. This karmic evolutionary condition creates very intense emotional needs, as well as intense emotions, feelings, and moods. I'm getting that some of you will finally, you didn't know where they were coming from, and they're from the past. They were either passed down to you from your mother in her 3rd trimester of pregnancy, where the mother, every mother, automatically downloads trillions of bits of information into the baby's brain. And it's not just from her, it's from what she received from her mother during that trimester, 3rd trimester, or her mother's mother, or all the way back to the very beginning of your lineage, and or past life, whatever you believe, maybe both. Okay. The unconscious expectation to have the parents meet these needs is the dynamic that creates the intense emotions, feelings, and moods when one or both of the parents fail to do so. It is important to understand that the individual's experience and interpretation of his or her parents' behavior can be quite different than how one or both of the parents interpret their own behavior toward the 4th house Pluto individual. So I'm going to read that again because it's so essential. So it's going to trigger you specifically, and from an experience that very well could have been from the past and doesn't have anything to do with the parents that you currently have in this life. But because it triggered you, you could very easily, of course, because you didn't know, express that trigger back on them, maybe how you would have wanted to, or how you did express yourself in that past life. It is important to understand that the individual's experience and interpretation of his or her parents' behavior can be quite different than how one or both of the parents interpret their own behavior toward the 4th house Pluto person. And I want you to know, please do not feel bad. Those of you that are seeing this to be true for you as I'm reading, because you didn't know, but now you do know. And so you can see it clearly where you didn't before because you're being triggered. But now, if you're able to, you can take care of that and clear that up with whatever parent or whoever that was. The inherent insecurity that many of these individuals arrive in this life with creates a bottomless pit with respect to how much emotional nurturing that they require in order to feel secure. And I'm going to repeat that one. That is important. The inherent insecurity that many of these individuals arrive in this life with creates a bottomless pit with respect to how much emotional nurturing that they require in order to feel secure. One or both the parents may not be able to give the amount of emotional nurturing that the individual requires. The reasons may be very legitimate. For example, work or career concerns can remove the parents from the individual's immediate environment. As a child, the 4th house Pluto person does not have the ability to understand the legitimate reasons of why one or both parents are not available. Thus, the individual interprets this situation as not receiving the necessary amount of emotional nurturing that he or she requires. This triggers the prior life associations and memories, which in turn leads to the intense emotional states described above. However, from an evolutionary point of view, this is necessary because of the ongoing lessons in internal security and the minimization of external dependencies. So now hopefully you can see, or you will be able to see, that this was what you were meant to go through. This painful experiences to bring up those triggers so that you could have the ability, the awareness, the desire to, or even the force, because Pluto is forceful, to dig to the bottom to find out the solution and where this came from so that you could move forward and move on and finally take care of, not have it looming over your head, not having those bad experiences, those emotionally triggering and debilitating experiences stop you, block you anymore from your life purpose and who you truly are. And that's why you're here listening right now. Wow, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. In other cases, some of these individuals will draw a parent who emotionally dominates their life. This is the type of parent who does not allow the individual to grow up. This type of parent desires to remain a central figure in the individual's life and will covertly or overtly manipulate the individual. In this situation, the parent asserts his or her own emotional needs and does not recognize the emotional needs of the child. Again, the individual is thrown back in on him or herself. In still other cases, one or both parents will manifest cruel, vindictive, or outright abusive behavior toward the individual. This type of behavior can take many forms and will manifest in varying degrees of intensity. We must determine the basis of the prior life associations between the fourth house Pluto individual and the parents in order to understand why these conditions exist and how to resolve them. In many of these cases, the intense emotional needs that had not been met in the early environment will translate into emotional displacement. In other words, these individuals can form relationships with others in which they unconsciously expect and attempt to have their emotional needs met by another. In effect, these emotional needs are those of a child. And again, this is what you were to experience so that you could become consciously aware, like you are right now, of what you still weren't able to take care of in the past. You can now do it. Now you can. As a result, others can treat them as children and not allow them to grow up. All the emotional difficulties and the pain associated with these difficulties are compulsively projected upon others in varying degrees of intensity and expectation. And you also might want to check your Chiron placement for some of you. How your Chiron, or if your Chiron aspects this Pluto placement for you. So it's South Node and or Chiron, along with this placement of Pluto. Because that would absolutely tell you astrologically that you've had past lives of this. This is one of the ways. Okay. If you have a Chiron aspecting in hard aspect, especially hard aspect of your Pluto, and or South Node is another key indication. Whether it's hard aspect or even soft aspect. So trine, sextile are the soft aspects, and the hard is conjunct, opposition, or square. Okay. The closer the fourth house Pluto person becomes to another, the more intense the projections and expectations. In intimate relationships, these individuals will unconsciously draw partners whose psychological makeup is similar to one or both parents. This is especially true in the earlier part of their life. Through emotional displacement, they are attempting to recover or experience, through perpetual demands, the early feeling of nurturing of their individuality that they did not have from one or both of the parents. Yet, because the partners are similar to one or both of the parents, this displaced need goes unfulfilled. Again, these individuals are forced back in upon themselves. So now you get to see why you've been in those types of relationships. This is where it comes from, and now you can take care of it. This cycle will repeat again and again until the fourth house Pluto person progressively learns to understand why this kind of situation exists, learns how to supply their own internal security, and to emotionally mature through actualizing and establishing their own individuality through their own efforts. How beautiful. In addition, they must learn how to minimize or eliminate all external dependencies of having their needs met by another, or having their need for security dependent on an external situation. You get to find it within, and then it will never go away. It will be solid, solid forevermore. Until this lesson is accomplished, the potential is great to manipulate others emotionally in order to have their childlike and self-centered needs met. Emotional tantrums, rage, anger, emotional withdrawal, crying wolf, or feigning desperation in one form or another, extreme fluctuations of moods, deep feelings of guilt. What did I do to deserve this? Why did I just do that? Are common symptoms. Until they understand the lessons that they are learning and the reasons for those lessons. As they learn to minimize their dependencies and resulting expectations, they will put their ongoing evolutionary lessons in motion. In some cases, intense emotions and needs translate into an utter fear of vulnerability. All fourth house Pluto people have extremely sensitive and touchy emotions. In certain cases, some of these individuals have learned how to cancel or deny their deep inner sense of emotional vulnerability and sensitivity. They have learned to do this through repeated lifetimes of emotional shocks, denial, and emotional manipulation by their families and others. This conditioned reaction is also based on life experiences in which the famous rug has been ripped out from under their feet. The rug of emotional dependency will always be pulled out from beneath them when the degree of dependency creates a non-growth situation. As a result of this conditional emotional reaction, these people will experience emotional suffocation and frustration in this life because they're not expressing their emotional needs or expectations. Many of these individuals will even deny that they have strong emotions and needs. Many will deny that they have any emotional problems at all. Yet, because the fourth house person is intrinsically sensitive and vulnerable and needing to be touched on an emotional level by at least one other, this conditional rection, I'm not sure what that means, rection, R-E-C-T-I-O-N, guarantees a lifetime or cycles within a lifetime of emotional suffocation, non-fulfillment, difficulties, and a negative self-image because of the suppression involved. Commonly, people who have reacted in this way will draw to themselves others who they can dominate and control on an emotional basis. Typically, the types that they draw will be emotionally weak or in need of some form of emotional healing. These others can themselves have unresolved or unfulfilled emotional situations revolving around one or both of their own parents. The fourth house Pluto individual will control and dominate by identifying the weakest point in another's emotional makeup and will continually focus upon that weak point. In this way, they never allow the other to quote unquote get away from their sphere of influence. They compulsively need to run the other person down, to tear them apart, in order to make the other feel as though the fourth house Pluto individual is indispensable in their life. Thus, by putting another down, they are elevating themselves, so to speak. And yet the other person is, in their own way, unconsciously placing these individuals in a position of dominance and control relative to their own karmic and emotional needs. In this type of reaction, the fourth house Pluto individual guarantees the protection of their own vulnerability and essential insecurity on an emotional level. If this reaction is connected to unresolved anger or rage at one or both of the parents, the displaced emotional effect translates into taking this anger out on the other people that they draw into their own life. This conditional emotional reaction, leading to the need to dominate and control, is a backhanded way of trying to fulfill their security and dependency needs. By being in a position of dominance and control, they maintain their relationships and fulfill the security issue. Yet, their deepest emotional needs will go unresolved in this kind of conditional reaction because the people that they draw to them will be emotionally unequipped to help them. The point to consider is this: emotional denial does not equal emotional security, nor resolution of the evolutionary and karmic necessities. And again, don't feel bad if this rings true for you because you didn't know. But now you know. This is why you were drawn to this reading. Now you know, and now you can do something about this. This conditional reaction can also lead to situations in which these individuals attempt to dominate and control the environmental situations that they find themselves in. This kind of domination can occur through verbal, emotional dominance, or through silently injecting a negative mood. So outwardly or outwardly, openly doing this, or more manipulatively, underground. This kind of domination can occur through verbal emotional dominance or through silently injecting a negative mood. Those who are manifesting a childlike response to their life can project themselves in the same way. All too often, this tactic will draw negative vibrations back to the individual and will once again force them in upon themselves. On a positive note, this effect can lead to the awareness of the inner dynamics that are creating these kinds of environmental effects in their lives. In this knowledge, they can potentially make the necessary changes and realize the evolutionary lessons involved. The emotional reactions of the fourth house Pluto individual can cyclically alternate between these two reactions. These individuals can alternate between seeking out places and people whom they unconsciously expect to fulfill their displaced emotional needs in a childlike way, or they can seek out environments and others whom they can dominate and control in order to have their unresolved emotional issues fulfilled in that way, to make others depend on them. These alternating cycles can occur within one primary relationship, or it can occur through the selection of different kinds of relationships or environmental situations at different times. All fourth house Pluto individuals will experience the full spectrum of emotions, moods, and feelings in the most intense possible way. Every emotion is deeply felt, because the intrinsic nature of Pluto is to understand the why of anything. Each mood, feeling, and emotion is intensely focused upon. This fixation can be so total that the person can appear paralyzed and unable to act in any way other than the particular emotion dictates. Okay, what that particular emotion dictates is what this author is meaning. In extremely rare cases, this dynamic will promote catatonic-like states. A classic example of this catatonic-like reaction is reflected in the last years of Friedrich Nietzsche's life, who had a fourth house Pluto. These moods, feelings, emotions originate from unconscious depths, just like the seething lava beneath a volcano. Commonly, some external experience acts as a trigger to induce the manifestation of these phenomena. Sometimes the individual becomes a quote-unquote victim of some emotional wind that just seems to manifest out of the blue. Thus, the individual can feel one way at a certain moment and then feel something else the next moment. These individuals can seem, as a result, highly inconsistent in their emotional expressions and needs. Of course, This dynamic can be just as confusing to the fourth house Pluto individual as it is to those that they interact with. These intense inner states must be experienced because they are the source of self-knowledge and the path to inner security. I'm going to read that sentence again. Of course, this dynamic can be just as confusing to the fourth house Pluto individual as it is to those that they interact with. These intense inner states must be experienced because they are the source of self-knowledge and the path to inner security. The challenge is to become aware of the trigger or stimulus producing the emotions, mood, feeling, rather than just living it through without reflecting upon the origin or cause. If these individuals make the attempt to understand the cause or trigger behind any given emotional state, then they can develop a penetrating insight into the nature of emotional dynamics. This insight can be applied to themselves and then to others. These individuals will have two very distinct emotional cycles. On the one hand, they will have a cycle wherein they are deeply withdrawn, silent, and desiring to be left alone and undisturbed until they become aware of what is causing a particular feeling. They must withdraw because the origin of the emotion is manifesting from subconscious realms. Once the awareness comes, the other emotional cycle will be triggered. In this cycle, they will become animated, processing whatever it was that manifested from the subconscious realm. These are natural cycles for these individuals. These alternating cycles can fluctuate wildly. They are inconsistent, unpredictable, and can change at any moment. It is important for these individuals to be involved with others who understand that they operate in this way. Extreme problems and emotional confrontations can occur when others in the individual's life do not understand this natural process. This lack of understanding by others can lead to emotional scenes and confrontations wherein they attack the fourth house Pluto person in their necessary cycle of withdrawal. Others may read these cycles of withdrawal in an emotionally defensive way. They can feel threatened and insecure when these individuals withdraw and become silent. This will only aggravate the emotional reactions of the fourth house Pluto person because others are interfering with this natural cycle. A very common source of the emotional states and difficulties affecting internal security and self-image issues is that most of these individuals have switched gender in the most recent, if not the last, life. A new evolutionary cycle has begun in which these individuals are experiencing for the first time in a long time the opposite gender than what they have just been. The male has been female, and the female has been male in the most recent prior lives. The fourth house, Cancer, and the moon all correlate to the Jungian psychological dynamic called the anima. anema or anemus. And I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correct. So those dynamics correlates to the basic fact that all people are intrinsically male and female. From an evolutionary point of view, each individual must experience the inherent polarities of maleness and femaleness. There is a natural and distinct law to the principle and experience of femininity and masculinity. Because there is a distinct law and principle to each, the psychological and experiential orientation to life will be naturally different relative to what gender an individual manifests through. Through natural evolutionary progression over many, many lifetimes, all of us will learn how to unite both halves of ourselves in a totally integrated way, rather than living or playing out the extremes of each to the denial or detriment of the other. Pluto in the 4th house or 10th house will correlate to this gender switch. Other astrological symbols that can correlate to this gender switch are the south and north nodes in the 4th or 10th houses, or the nodes being in Cancer and or Capricorn. A feeling of security linked to gender can also be difficult to attain for the 4th house Pluto person. Many of these individuals will not relate to themselves well in their present gender, especially considering the conditional ways that particular cultures define masculinity and femininity. Because most of these individuals have been relating to themselves in the opposite gender in the most recent prior lives, the hormonal and gender switch becomes its own source of emotional conflict. This conflict, again, is based on the fact that the emotional, intellectual, spiritual, and physical structure of a man and a woman are intrinsically different. This conflict can be reduced in magnitude if this is not the first or second time the person has come back in that gender. This process is similar to buying a new pair of shoes. The more the shoes are worn, the most comfortable they become. They become our shoes. In certain cases, this condition can be aggravated by one or both parents. As an example, a client of mine who had a 4th house Pluto was brought up to be a female, even though he was male in this life. The mother wanted to have a little girl. Her anger and resentment of the fact that her child was male manifested in this type of behavior toward this man. Obviously, this early environmental impact devastated his self-image and emotional structure. All of these factors contribute to the continuing evolutionary lesson of inner security. These individuals are learning to know and trust themselves so that they can know and trust others. What time is it? Okay, I have to stop right now. I'm going to have to do a part 2 of this because I am not done. So I apologize, but this is part 1, and I will continue this reading in part 2. Okay. Bye until now or another minute. Okay.